did the Easter Bunny come from, and why does a rabbit give out eggs?
It's a European folk tradition. But I guess you're about to claim it's pagan, because we have to have this myth thrown in our faces every Easter.
The exact origins of the Easter Bunny are unclear, but it's believed to have originated in Germany during the Middle Ages.
Yes, but the oldest reference to an Easter bunny or hare dates to the late 1600s. There may be an earlier reference in the 1500s, but that's unsupported.
The tradition probably stems from the pagan festival of Easter, which honored the goddess of the same name and was celebrated during the spring equinox in the form of feasting and fertility rituals.
So this is all incorrect. First, we have no primary sources that speak of a festival called Eostre. All we have is St. Bede, who says there was a goddess by that name. He wrote, Eostramenath has a name which is now translated Paschal month, and which was once called after a goddess of theirs named Eostra, in whose honor feasts were celebrated in that month. Now they designate that Paschal season by her name, calling the joy of the new rite by the time-honored name of the old observance. That's the only reference we have for a goddess named Eostra, and notice B doesn't say anything about bunnies, eggs, fertility rituals, or say there was a festival that was also called by that name. All we know is that Germanic pagans feasted to her in the month that was named after her.
Easter was eventually co-opted by Christians, and it was rebranded as a celebration of Jesus' rebirth.
This is just flat out wrong. Christians were celebrating Easter, or Pascha, long before they encountered Eostre worshippers. The only thing that changed is that when Christians moved in the Germanic regions, they started calling the Pascha after the month it fell in, which was Eostramenath. This is why in English we now refer to it as Easter. But that doesn't make Easter pagan because it was renamed after a month that was named after a goddess, any more than the 4th of July would be pagan because it falls in the month named after Julius Caesar.
Following this theme of new life, rabbits and hares, which have long been seen as symbols of fertility and new life, as they often give birth to large litters in the spring, became the holiday mascot.
That didn't happen until the late 1600s or maybe the 1500s. It has nothing to do with paganism. Rabbits or hares are seen often in the spring, so they were just associated with Easter because of that factor.
If they were good, they'd be given gifts like toys and colored eggs, eggs being another symbol of new life.
No, eggs became associated with Easter because of Lent. During the Lenten fast in the Middle Ages, you would fast from all animal products. Eggs could be hard-boiled and saved, so towards the end of Lent, they would hard-boil the eggs and save them for the Easter celebration. The oldest reference to this dates to the late 1200s in England. The Easter celebration is a Christian holiday in origin. There is no evidence any of its customs came from paganism.
Millions of people around the world celebrate Easter Sunday, but did you know that it has pagan roots?
Gee, I wonder how crazy this one's going to get.
The holiday started back in the ancient Babylonian goddess Semiramis, who was also known as Ishtar or Esther.
Okay. Semiramis was never a goddess, let alone equated with Ishtar. She was a legendary queen of Assyria who was probably based off a real queen from the Iron Age. And the goddess Ishtar was never called Esther, let alone Semiramis. The name Esther probably derives from the name Ishtar, though.
Semiramis was called goddess of fertility and was worshipped as the mother of God.
She most certainly was not, because she was never considered a goddess, and this is a statue of Ishtar.
After she died, she was said to have been resurrected as the goddess of spring. This resurrection became the basis for the Easter Sunday celebration.
Again, this is all nonsense. All this comes from the 19th century writer Alexander Hislop, who made up this nonsense to attack the Catholic Church. But he had no expertise or training in the fields he was writing about, and historians today reject his works.
The tradition of Easter eggs also has pagan origins.
No, it doesn't.
Eggs were used in ancient Babylonian rituals to represent new life and rebirth, and were later adopted by some Christians as a symbol of Jesus' resurrection.
Historians today argue that Easter eggs came from Lent. During the Lenten fast in the Middle Ages, you couldn't eat any animal products. Eggs could be hard-boiled and saved. So towards the end of Lent, they would save the eggs for the Easter celebration. The earliest reference to Easter eggs comes from the 13th century in England, not ancient Babylon.
So, if you're celebrating Easter Sunday, take a moment to check on its pagan roots and the history behind this ancient holiday.
Or you could just check and see what historians have to say, and they'll tell you the holiday is Christian in origin.
Let's talk about the pagan holiday that's been rebranded to be a Christian holiday that's coming up this month.
There's no such thing.
But the holiday that I'm referring to, I'm sure you guys know, is Easter. Easter is actually a rebranded version of Astra or Astara, in which we worship the goddess of fertility. We worship the fertile grounds in which we planted seeds in.
So we have no ancient or medieval text that ever referred to an ancient pagan holiday called Ostara. All we have is Saint Bede, who says there was a goddess named Aostra. A month in spring was named after her called Aostromanath, and in that month they celebrated her with certain feasts, but we have no idea what those feasts were called.
Christianity rebranding it, saying that like, oh, Jesus rose from the dead, is really just the seeds that we planted rising up out of the ground.
We have no evidence the worship of Aostra involved seeds coming up out of the ground, or that Christians rebranded this as an idea of Jesus rising from the dead. Historians do not say Easter is a rebranded pagan holiday, because Christians were celebrating Easter in the Roman world long before they encountered Aostra worshippers. What historians do note is that Easter is traditionally called the Pascha. When Christians started moving into Germanic regions, they started calling the celebration after the month it fell in, which was Aostromanath. So that's why we call it Easter today. It came from the month it fell in, which was named after the goddess. But that doesn't make it pagan any more than the 4th of July would be pagan, just because it falls in a month named after Julius Caesar.
So this goes with manifestation and energy work and all of that other stuff, but really the root of everything, we're simply worshiping the fertileness of spring.
You're welcome to do that, but that has nothing to do with the origins of Easter, which has always been a holiday celebrating the day Jesus rose from the dead. And Jesus, being the Son of God, has nothing to do with the sun in the sky. You're trying to make a connection based on how the words sound in English.
Definitely recommend looking into your religious holidays and maybe going back in history and looking at what they actually are.
And if you do that, you'll find that Easter, Valentine's Day, Christmas, and even Halloween have no pagan origins. All these holidays are Christian in origin. If you go back on my page to the time around Christmas or Halloween, you'll find numerous videos where I explain this in more detail.
This Sunday, when you go and sit in your mega church in your brand new Easter dress that you spend a lot of money on so that you'll impress other people.
Well, it sounds like you're just jealous of how impressive I'm gonna look.
You're not worshiping the resurrection of Jesus.
Of course we aren't. We're worshiping Jesus, not the resurrection of Jesus, which doesn't make any sense.
You are participating in the pagan ritual and festival of Easter and the worship of the god Ishtar.
There is not a scrap of evidence the Easter celebration is a stolen pagan holiday that originally honored the goddess Ishtar. Most people around the world actually call Easter Pascha because it derives from the word for Passover. The reason we in the English-speaking world call it Easter is because when Christians moved into Germanic regions, they started calling the Pascha after the month it fell in, which was Aostromanath, so they called it the Easter festival.
The fertility god, who is aligned with the god Moloch.
Okay, first off, Ishtar was a goddess, and there is no evidence she was ever associated with Molech, who's only mentioned in the Hebrew Bible.
Put eggs in their blood and sacrifice that to their god.
Now you're just making things up.
Jesus, his resurrection does not change dates like the Easter holiday. It was actually in the Israel calendar Nisan 17, which translates to April 5th for us.
The Jewish calendar is a lunar solar calendar, so the dates change every year. Nisan 17 does not always fall on April 5th. The reason the date of Easter or Pascha changes from year to year is not because of paganism. At the Council of Nicaea, our early Christian leaders wanted a standardized way for all Christians to celebrate Easter. So they decided that Easter will fall on the first Sunday after the first full moon of the spring equinox. And that's why the date of Easter changes from year to year.